welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Ononye, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase scientific innovation stemming from global life science companies through conversations with senior leaders who share their unique leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Mr. Patrick Hughes, Chief Commercial Officer of CluePoints, a central statistical monitoring solution that has been designed and perfected over the last 10 years. CluePoints' risk-based quality management, or RBQM platform, employs unique statistical algorithms to determine the quality, accuracy, and integrity of clinical trial data, both during and after study conduct. Patrick is a Chief Strategy Officer, C-suite consultant, and commercial executive with 20 plus years of international experience across life sciences, healthcare, IT, and telecommunications. Patrick is responsible for leading global sales, product, marketing, operational, and technical teams that have consistently developed double-digit growth and achieved strategic objectives. Patrick is a fellow of the Institute of Direct Marketing and postgraduate B2B marketing strategy diploma from Northwestern University, Illinois. I had the pleasure of meeting him last year following a presentation by the CEO of CluePoints, Francois Torch, at the CNS Summit. I was highly impressed by Patrick's charisma and commitment to leveraging his expertise in business development, product, and marketing to advance the company. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hi, Sophia, and thanks very much for having me on. And you told me I shouldn't be prepared so that I could come across naturally, and then I find out that you're so much more prepared than I am. So thanks for that.
Well, that's the trick, right? But my first question is my favorite, because you're free to answer it as you feel. What is your definition of scientific innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that you were going to ask me this question, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to really overthink this because I could get myself into some encyclopedic rabbit hole about the different words. But I mean, I guess for me, it's anything that is designed to further the way that helps us to live our life to the fullest. That's really how I see innovation working. And so whether that's the kind of, incremental innovation that we're seeing, and some might say that this is coming faster than we've ever known, but to do with, I don't know, the Human Genome Project or personalized medicine. But it might also be that incremental innovation that we've seen from things like Uber. That's not absolutely disruptive. It's using cars to take people around. We know them as taxis usually, but now we've seen this sort of incremental innovation that helps us in the way that we live our lives day to day. But I mean, it's all the way up to the more disruptive innovation, the types of things that we've seen with the iPhone and that type of, scientific innovation. So, I guess the disruptive innovation that we're seeing now, exhibited by lots of the companies in our industry to do with COVID-19, and sort of developing or trying to develop vaccines in the next 6 months that would ordinarily take 10 years to develop. I mean, all those kind of things that have helped to make us or to give us the opportunity to lead a better and fuller life. That's how I see the sort of the scientific innovation question that you ask.
Wonderful. I like the multifaceted approach to your response. I think that's really powerful on its own. You're welcome. As I alluded to earlier, you've achieved quite a lot, right? But I'm curious to know, what do you think is the most significant or impactful professional achievement you've had to date?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, isn't it? Because it sounds a bit like you're blowing your own trumpet, doesn't it? So, The things that the one thing that sticks in my mind, and it's not happened to me, it's not just happened to me once, it's happened a couple of times, almost exactly the same way. I did my formative career years at a company called ClinPhone, and we were instrumental at that time in using what was groundbreaking technology, which was touch tone signaling on a telephone, to randomize patients into clinical trials and to dispense medication in a sort of just-in-time fashion across the globe. And that was using this DTMF signaling on a telephone to do it, which everybody thought we were bonkers. And that business developed, and it was hugely successful, and was eventually sold to Par Excel. But I mean, we didn't have huge budgets. We were growing. We were fairly bootstrapped when I certainly started with the company, and it subsequently happened again with CluePoints, where again we started from nothing and have grown organically, and leveraged our survived on our wits for the most part in the early days. And the one thing that sticks in my mind about what colleagues and prospects and clients in the industry have said to me is, either ClinPhone or CluePoints, you guys are everywhere. And that's really satisfying, because we're not everywhere. We're just in the places they are looking. And with me being a sort of a marketer at heart, the fact that we are able to punch above our weight and to exude that confidence and that credibility that is so important for a business that's just starting up or starting out, that's really satisfying. And obviously it's not just me, there's a whole host of people involved in promoting and putting out that sort of message. But it's nice to hear that that's the case. When I think about it in a more deeper way, though, certainly both professionally and personally, the ability to take CluePoints from where it started from, which was pretty much nothing, to where we are today, that's probably the most satisfying. And both for me and the co-founders of the business, you mentioned Francois Torsch, Mark Boyce is actually the guy who brought Francois and I together. Our colleagues and certainly the industry clients that we partner with, have all taken us on this journey. But it's certainly been the most, and I've been involved in a number of successful businesses, but this has been the most successful, the most quickly, which I'm enormously proud about on behalf of myself and for others. So that's really the best answer I can give you about where I'm getting most satisfaction of what has occurred in my career to date. Oh, fly.
Okay, well, that's great. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but I want to dive in a little bit more to discover what inspired you to join CluePoints as its Chief Commercial Officer.
It's not really what inspired me to join CluePoints, it's really who inspired me to join CluePoints. So 7 years ago, nearly 8 years ago now, I was doing some consulting work with Mark Boyce for a company that he is also the founder of called IDDI. They are a stats and data management company that's been around for a number of years. Really fabulous little company that Mark has founded and has subsequently seen the oversight of growing that business. And he, as I was doing some work on their sales and marketing strategy, he invited me to take a look at this sort of pseudo academic project that they've been working on in the background to do with the use of statistical algorithms to drive better data quality and integrity into clinical studies, as you mentioned so eloquently at the start. And Mark said, look, we've got this idea. We want to know what your thoughts are. Should we couple it up with the kind of stats and data management services that we do already for lots of clients around the world? Or do you think it warrants something different? And with best intentions, I said, look, what if what you're telling me is to be believed, then you really have a real gem of an idea here that I don't want you to get lost in the rest of the great work that you're doing on the services side, because inevitably it will become a sort of an offshoot of what you're delivering in services, and it will become an enabler, a tool that you will use internally and people will see benefit from it. But I'm not sure you will see, or the industry will see, the value of what you've got here, because it sounds so fascinating and it sounds so exciting, and you need to give that a pedestal to put it on, and a way of making sure the industry knows what you've got here. And if you do that alongside everything else, I think you might undersell the value of what you've created. And he said, oh, that's very interesting. And then about a month later, he phoned me up and he said, you know, you were telling me about, you know, what you thought we needed to do. He said, why don't you do it? And then it became a whole different proposition, because now I had to put my money where my mouth was. And if we were going to actually do this for real, then I would have to sort of embark on that journey of starting with just an idea, essentially, and then building the whole thing around it. And that was obviously a much more scary proposition, but it hadn't been for Mark and it hadn't been for Francois in sort of looking at the vision of where this could go. I think I would have probably opted for something a lot safer. And considering we're in the risk-based quality management field, there was that risk-based decision that I had to take. And thankfully, I probably did what I usually wouldn't do, because I'm fairly risk averse, unlike my colleague and partner Francois, who's a poker player and and attracted to the risk elements more than I am. I decided to go to embark on this journey. So it was the inspirational idea and then the sort of the vision of where this could take us that made me think, well, if I don't do this, I've always tried to make decisions on, well, if I don't do this, I might regret it. And if that even enters my head, then I'm going to have to take that leap of faith.
Great. So I think I want to break down your response even more. I want to find out more about where this will take us. What does that mean? And how are you using your risk-based quality management software for COVID-19, immunotherapies, and other important diseases that warrants public attention at this time? So tell me more about that. What are you guys doing right now?
Yeah, I think the regulators have made good progress, and I know the industry is always looking for more from the regulators to understand what their expectations are. But with the guidance ICH E6 revision 2 and soon to be revision 3, I think the regulators really have given the industry a gift. It's not very often that you get regulations that are focusing on efficiency. Usually more regulations means more things to do, more stringent guidance, more inefficiency, because you've got to tick loads more boxes and make sure things are much more safe. And, it usually doesn't exist that more regulations mean greater efficiency. But what the regulator has said is, look, we understand that you guys are doing things in the way that drugs are being developed that could be way more efficient. And we want to give you almost pointers, guidance as to what we expect going forward, so that you can do more with less resources, less budget. And that is sort of encapsulated by the whole dynamic around risk-based quality management. And so in particular, what has brought this to the forefront during the COVID-19 crisis is the fact that companies can't do what they usually did. It's just not possible, because they can't visit sites. They can't undertake those sorts of monitoring activities in the way they could do. So, there's a really good catalyst there from the pandemic itself. And if ever there was a silver lining to this dark cloud that hangs above us all, it's the fact that it might actually give companies the reason to change, which I think the regulators have given us the guidance, they've given us the opportunity. Now you have to bite the bullet and actually do it. And so you asked about what CluePoints has been doing. We're supporting in the region of 300 studies that have been directly affected by the pandemic, which is, obviously quite some number. That's to do with things like risk assessment. So when the crisis sort of took hold, industry and regulators around the globe said, look, you need to conduct a risk assessment. If you hadn't already done so, which you should have been doing, by the way, you need to conduct a risk assessment of how it's going to affect all the studies. And then as a result of that, obviously mitigate the risk, as the study progresses. And so we put together a sort of a holistic guidance of how that risk assessment might work, and actually invited companies to use our tool free of charge as it pertained to conducting that risk assessment. So we said, look, have the risk assessment. We know you're in a bind and scrambling. Here's our tool. Please feel free to make the most of it whilst you need to, get your arms around the nature of the problem. And then having done that, companies have not only done the risk assessment part, but they're also using the analytical tools that CluePoints has developed to help mitigate the risk. So instead of sending people on site to monitor the sites themselves, they can do it using the technology and using that oversight to do it. So we've been doing that for all manner of different companies of different sizes and shapes, including about a dozen studies that are directly involved in finding a vaccine for COVID-19. So, studies that have been affected by it, but also studies that are trying to solve the problem as well.
Very well said. And now that you've sort of given us that present focused look on what you all are doing right now, what does the future hold for CluePoints? What is your vision for the company?
Yeah, I mean, we're very, very much, what we like to say is, we're dedicated to doing this type of work now. We're not going to be distracted by other technologies. We're not going to try and become an EDC company or an ECOA company. This is what we're focused on, is improving data quality and integrity and early risk detection. That's really what our raison d'etre is. That's what we decided to set up in the first instance. That's the nature of the statistical interrogation of clinical operational data that we do. So we're going to, I guess this is a British expression, we're going to stick to the knitting, and we're going to continue to do what we've done for the foreseeable future. That said, though, I mean, the exciting things that we've already embarked on and are now finding their way into the products, into the software itself, are elements to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we're beginning to harness the power of the data. And what that will inevitably mean, and where we've charted a course towards moving from where we are now to what we might be in the future, is that we will become a knowledge company. And that's, we're a software company today with some great tools to help solve specific issues that exist. But in the future, we want to be a knowledge company that starts to look at the way that we can use sort of predictive analytics, the way that we can harness that AI and machine learning aspects, so that companies can make better judgments about even down to the protocol design type stages, where we might know from what we've seen in the past what makes a good or a bad protocol in terms of its design. So it's around harnessing the data in that way and making getting the most out of it. And I think that's what we do today in part, but it's very centered on the study itself. And the broader vision is how we can use all that data holistically, to do with how studies and drug development is planned in the future.
That is very well said. A knowledge company. I'm actually blown away by that. And I think that you guys should put a patent on that or a trademark on that as soon as possible.
Okay, I will do.
But switching gears to a macro view, in your opinion, of course, how has the life science industry changed in the UK and also thinking globally in the past 10, 15 years?
I suppose the flippant answer is not enough, really. Well, I mean, we've been doing the same things the same way for the last 2 decades. And I think that's, as I said before, if ever there was a time for change, you know, everybody looking at the world through a new lens as we are now, this is the time to be doing, and we need to innovate much faster than we've ever done before. You know, so that, I mean, there has been material changes. As I mentioned, you know, personalized medicine, and you know, the look towards telemedicine, and harnessing the power of wearables and all of these things. But you know, I'd like to say they were being used in a great many instances, in a great many clinical trials, but they're just not yet. I mean, we see enough trials to know what's going on. It took, you know, 15 to 20 years for EDC to catch on. Similar, if not longer, for ECOA to play a part in a lot of clinical trials. And, you know, I think we can just do a lot more, a lot faster. And hopefully this is the catalyst for that change that we need. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that there's certain elements of the industry, like the way that, you know, functional silos work, that stop innovation in its tracks at the best of times, that just those kind of barriers just need to be broken down once and for all now.
Yeah, well, very well said once again. And I think you alluded to this earlier, and there might be a similar response in when I asked you the next question, but we'll see. So my next question is this. How do you think the industry could have reacted differently to COVID-19 to potentially mitigate the impact? What could we have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
I've heard, you know, that all of these nations have had a pandemic has been their number one disaster recovery, you know, across different industries, across different nations. And guess what? They've never, ever prepared properly for it. So, you know, I'd like to think that now it's actually happened, and it's not just a pandemic as a word on a piece of paper, which clearly it was previously. That we will be better prepared for next time, and we will look at, and you said, I alluded to this earlier, that we'll look at how to harness the types of technology and process change that is needed to move things, you know, to move the industry forward. I mean, you know, we've been, I'll talk about something very specific to the kind of work that we're involved in. You know, the gold standard approach to the way that you oversee data in a clinical trial at the moment, operationally, is to send people out to sites every 6 to 8 weeks to manually look at data on, you know, PCs or source data, the way that it's collected, the way that it's transcribed, and it's just ridiculous. Less than 2% of the data changes after each monitoring visit. And that process, it's not the people, it's the process, doesn't find the problems that exist in the data. It's worse than useless. And yet we spend a third of the clinical trial budget on that exercise. So it just doesn't make sense. And you know, I think everybody recognizes it doesn't make sense, but they just haven't had, I don't know if it's the right word, but they haven't had the guts, or they haven't had the incentive to change that anymore. And I guess this is the big incentive. You can't get to sites, you can't send people, people can't travel. This is the way you should be looking at it. We've got a company that in the industry now, Astellas, who making some big news about how they are not just reducing SDV, which seems to be another, you know, now that we recognize that SDV probably doesn't give you the benefits you thought it did, reducing SDV seems to be the next new sort of catchphrase. Well, they've decided to completely eradicate SDV. They've said, we recognize it's no good. This is not something we should be doing. Human beings are not very good at checking data. It doesn't matter how analytical you are. A computer can do it better. And let's use the computer to do it better. So, you know, that's just one very specific element. But, you know, I think it serves to highlight that there are, and I'm sure, you know, that's not the only process in the industry that needs an overhaul. But as we spend, you know, let's say worst case or best case scenario, I should say 15% of a multi-million-dollar clinical trial budget on that specific exercise that's worse than useless, then I think we've got, you know, a great distance to travel in terms of how we can become more efficient. And if the pandemic, with all of the disaster that has occurred around the globe, is the catalyst to that change, then so be it. Let's take advantage of the fact that, you know, that sort of good can come of it.
Well, I love your honesty. I think it's refreshing. One should always speak one's mind, right? And
I do think so. I'm not sure how many friends I'm making out there, but there you go.
Yeah, but it's important. The things that you're saying, what stood out to me most was the need to reduce inefficiencies in the drug discovery process. I think that it's time for us to move the state of the science forward. So with that context in mind, what technology or company, including yours, are you excited about, and why?
Well, you wouldn't mind me saying CluePoints again, would you? I mean, I feel like I've invested so much of myself in it at this point that, you know, I suppose when we started off, you know, you start off a journey like this with an idea and saying, well, how are we going to take this idea and somebody actually get some benefit or value from it? And that's quite a big ask in itself. But now that we understand where the value, we very much understand where the value could come from. The idea for us is that we could play a part in every single clinical trial in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying, you know, we're going to solve the ills of the industry in one fell swoop, but I mean, you know, I feel like that this is a really important element of innovation and, to some extent, disruption that's going to help clinical trials become more efficient. And, you know, I think if we can take play our part in some small way to that process, I really think that, you know, let's not hope it's 15 years like it was for EDC, but like in a few years' time, this will be part and parcel of every clinical trial process. Everybody will be looking through the lens of, what's my risk-based approach? How am I, what technology am I using? In the same way that, you know, you choose an EDC vendor or you choose an eCOA vendor, you'll be choosing an RBQM vendor to enable a much more efficient process. You know, the software product doesn't do it all by itself, but it enables the critical thinking. And hopefully, you know, I would have thought that there's a lot of jobs out there. I mean, 100% SDV is one of them, where I'm sure it's an absolute thankless task to go and check data. But if you're giving somebody the opportunity to think critically about the problem that has been uncovered using the technology, then I'd hope that it would make their jobs and their lives better for it, because now they say, right, this is where I want you to specifically spend your time looking at the nature of the problem and how to solve it. That sounds like a much more interesting job to me than trying to check, you know, what was on the source document and is that in EDC and what did it look like. That's boring. But if I can enable somebody to get the critical thinking around solving the problem, then that's much more valuable for them. It's much more valuable for their company, and hopefully it moves things along faster.
That is great. I imagine that the answer to my next question will probably involve critical thinking. And that's the beauty of our conversation. There's a lot of continuity because these are important concepts that don't exist in isolation. So my second to last question for you is, what are some key consideration factors that you think will be important for sustaining innovation in the life science industry?
Yeah, I mean, the one that is just staring me in the face every single day is change, and change not being considered a dirty word. I mean, it seems to terrify the living daylights out of people that, you know, they might have to change in the way they do their jobs or the way that the drug research is conducted. And it's torture. I mean, you know, if I tell you about CluePoints and the value that I think it could bring each and every study, I haven't had anybody that ever says it's either a bad idea or conceptually it won't work and it won't provide value to them. But inevitably, the next question is, but how am I going to do it? And where we've had greatest success is where we've had I mean, you can tell that we love evangelizing about it and we love educating the marketplace about it. But the most success as a business that we've had is when we have those people where the light bulb goes on above their heads and they say, I'm going to, thump the table, I'm going to wave the flag, and I'm going to get change, for the better implemented at my company. And I'm going to really stick my neck out because I believe in this. And unfortunately, there isn't those innovators themselves within the industry, or enough of them perhaps, to make the progress faster. And so that change, that siloed mentality that does exist still a lot, even though I'm sure companies wouldn't care to admit it. But the change management is key. Being able to adapt to the world around us. And again, we've got it every single day at the moment. I mean, I'm on Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx. I've got every video conferencing technology known to man sat on my laptop, and that's because we've changed the way that we work. And if we can do that, we can obviously harness technology to help in the way that the drug research is conducted. But it just takes change to be constant for that to happen. And we, look back at the industry. How has it really changed in the last 20 years? Not very much.
Again, very well said. So the final question is open-ended. Do you have any other commentary or thoughts? Anything that you forgot to mention that you'd like to emphasize?
Because you did tell me you were going to ask a sort of broad questions about the industry and everything else, and it sort of goes back to your comment about the patents, and I was sort of reminded of the commissioner of the US Patent Office in it was 1899. He said that everything that can be invented has been invented, which I think probably was slightly off the ball with that. So I think this idea of we certainly are going to see a huge amount of innovation, all the things to do with AI and machine learning that we're just scratching the surface with. But clearly they're going to be huge benefits by looking at data, understanding what you've got and how it works for you as a company. Those sorts of elements need to be embraced, and I think sometimes we talk about them a lot and they're good for PR purposes, but I don't see enough evidence that they're actually being done. So the use of virtual trial sites, the use of telemedicine, the use of wearables, and I mean, I know it brings with it a lot of other problems to solve. Like, if you've got wearables, you're not just worried now about hundreds of thousands of data points. You might be worried about hundreds of millions of data points, because that data streams all the time. And how are you going to monitor it? How are you going to oversee it? But that's where the technology comes in. And as long as you are able to get your arms around how you're going to implement technology alongside process change, then I think we can cover a lot of that ground quickly. So, your whole thought process here around this podcast and innovation and how we harness innovation, that's I'm obviously encouraging and challenging the industry to do more of that.
Very well said once again. Bravo. I've enjoyed talking to you, Patrick. I think that anyone who listens to this podcast or who watches it will also be blown away by just your charisma. And I don't know if it's your British sort of boldness. You speak your mind and you put a stick in the ground, and that is very refreshing. I will encourage you to keep doing that, because for me, scientific innovation is not about popularity. It's not about likes. It's really about impact. And as we can see, especially around COVID, we are impacted by what we do inherently. So this has been really nice just speaking with you again.
Yeah, no, lovely to speak to you as well, Sophia. And anything I can do to in the future to help you out, don't hesitate to ask. It's always a pleasure.
Same here. Well, have a good day and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you.